Welcome back to the Leaner, Stronger and Confident as Fuck podcast. On this week's episode, we are going to be diving in to some of the biggest mistakes that I see people make with their nutrition, which is holding them back from seeing the progress that they want. Whether they are focused on losing fat or building muscle, and they are tracking their food, they are aiming for specific calories, they may be eating clean, but their body composition is not changing in the way that they want. They're not getting leaner, they're not seeing the definition that they want, and it can cause you to start to wonder, what on earth am I doing wrong? And so this is the thing. Even when you think you are doing everything right with your nutrition, there can easily be mistakes that can cost you progress that you might not be aware of, or that if you actually take an honest look at what you're doing, then they might be glaringly obvious. And I guarantee it's not because you are not wanting to get the results or not trying hard enough. It's just these common mistakes crop up for every single one of us. And they certainly will have done for me. And these are ones that I see with my clients too. And so my goal with this episode is to highlight some areas for you to look at in your own journey so that then you can make the progress that you want. So I'm going to be sharing 7 of the most common mistakes that I see when it comes to your nutrition. I'm not going to be covering training or recovery or movement here. And those elements are also really important to a body transformation journey. So just know that we are just focused on nutrition. And as you listen to this, even if some of them are relevant to you, you might also find that you need to look at those other areas too to be able to see the best progress for your journey. But these are going to give you some starting points when it comes to your nutrition. And I'm also very excited to let you know that enrollment opens again very soon for my coaching program, Lean Body Blueprint, just over a week after this podcast episode is going live. And inside LBB, you'll get a structured plan for your training, your nutrition, your recovery, all customized to you. And we do bring all the aspects of body transformation together so that you can build a lean, strong, and defined body that actually lasts. And most importantly, you'll learn along the way exactly how you got those results through the education and the support that's inside the program so that you can take complete control of this area of your life for good. That is my mission with this program. So enrollment opens on the 6th of April. And we officially start the program on the 13th of April. And if you want first dibs on the early bird spaces so that you can join for just $20 a week and access an exclusive bonus as part of that too, then you need to be on the priority list. So you'll find that link to the priority list in the show notes below. So head there now, add your name to the list, and I cannot wait to support you inside the program too. So let's dive in to the 7 common nutrition mistakes that I see all the time. Mistake number 1 is eating clean, but eating either too much for fat loss or too little to build muscle. And I get the frustration with this one because this used to be my story for sure. You're choosing whole foods, you're eating vegetables, you're avoiding processed stuff, you're getting the things off the shelf that seem organic or the latest superfood, and you feel like you're doing all of the right things. But you can still eat clean and still eat too much to lose fat. And that's because fat loss comes down to energy balance. You need to be in a calorie deficit in order to lose fat. And it doesn't matter if the calories that you're consuming come from chicken, rice, and broccoli, or from pizza and ice cream. If you're eating more than your body needs, then you won't see the fat loss results that you're after. But here is where the message gets all conflicted, because I'm not saying here that food quality doesn't matter. It definitely does. It matters in how your body performs, in how you feel, in being able to stick with the process, and in terms of giving your body the micronutrients and the fiber that it needs as well. Whole foods are really important to focus on as the majority of your diet, both when it comes to managing hunger and having more satiety and managing your health in a more appropriate way as well. But still, if we eat too much of them and our goal is fat loss, then we won't see the results that we're after. And so it can be frustrating when you feel like you're eating really healthy, but when you actually start tracking your food and you do it really accurately, then it can be very illuminating to see actually how much we are eating. And this was something that was so true for me. I was eating lots of nut butters. I was adding olive oil to loads of things. I was having that MCT oil. I was grabbing handfuls of nuts. I was adding avocado to everything, not realizing how many calories were in all of that. And these are not bad foods to include in your journey at all. They've got loads of nutrients and they are really great to include. But we just need to be mindful of the portions because they are just so calorie dense. So if you are just focusing on eating clean, but you are not seeing fat loss results, then starting to become aware of exactly what foods you're eating and of how much you're eating of them by tracking your food is going to be so illuminating for you. And let's say your goal is to build muscle and you're trying to do that by just focusing on eating healthy or eating clean. That doesn't mean that you're giving your body the amount of protein that it needs to be able to build muscle effectively, because they are the building blocks of muscle. Or it doesn't mean that you are actually fueling your body well enough to have the energy and performance when you are training in your sessions to be able to get the most out of them, to be able to build muscle more effectively. And lots of women think that they are doing the right thing by eating less, pretty much like trying to eat less like for their entire year. And yet they are sometimes looking to build muscle, and that they're just not giving their body as much energy as it needs to be able to do that process effectively. So always lots of nuance to this, and it can be too much and it can be too little, but the best way to figure out is to start tracking. And that brings me on to mistake number 2, which I see so many times. If you are tracking, then just double check very frequently, every few weeks, do a tracking audit with yourself to see if you are doing it accurately and consistently enough, because this is something that plays out typically in a couple of different ways. Some people are really on it when they are tracking during the week, but then at the weekends they don't bother tracking. And they treat Saturday and Sunday as a free-for-all, or they think that just by focusing again on trying to eat healthy when they are out and eating out at the weekends, that they're still going to be staying in a deficit, for example, if they're in fat loss. But they don't realize just how many calories are in the foods that they're eating when they're out. And they wonder why they're not seeing progress. Because the frustrating fact, and I say frustrating because weekends held me back for so long, but you can completely undo 5 days of eating in a deficit in just 2 days of untracked or unplanned eating at the weekends, especially if you are working towards fat loss with a more moderate deficit target. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about weekends a little bit further into this episode. And so let's talk about the other side of tracking, because some people are tracking across 7 days, but they're not tracking accurately enough for good results. And that can look like eyeballing portions instead of actually weighing their food on a measuring scale and logging their food in grams and milliliters or ounces, whichever you use as a metric system for yourself. Or, for example, they are not tracking sources that they're using, or not tracking the oil that they are cooking with, whether it is in a frying pan or whether it is in a roasting tin. They're not tracking the oil, and that can literally add up to hundreds of calories in itself. Or they are not tracking all the bites, licks, and tastes that they have as they go through their day, whether that is, maybe cooking for the rest of their family and eating bits as they cook, or whether it is, just grabbing a little snack and not logging it, or as you're doing some meal prep, just munching on a couple of things as you do that. So many different ways that it can crop up. And all of these things start to really add up, especially if you're going for a more moderate deficit approach. Let's say, for example, you are only taking 300 calories off your maintenance for a fat loss phase. That 300 calories can easily be wiped out by inaccurate tracking or by having bites, licks, and tastes adding up throughout your day. And I just don't think people realize how quickly that 300 calories can be wiped out by inaccurate tracking. There's also the fact that, let's say you are eating several things during your day and your week from a packet. Anything that is a processed food, anything that's in a packet with a label on, has a margin of error with the tracking that they are allowed to report on their labels. So let's say something says it's 200 calories. There's actually a 20% margin of error that they are allowed for their reporting of calories. So that could mean whatever it is that you're having that you think is 200 calories could actually be 160 calories, or it could actually be 240 calories. And so if you're eating lots of processed food from packets, which has a 20% margin of error either way, and you're trying to lose fat, then if, for example, all of them are slightly underestimated in what they have reported, then you could easily, again, wipe out a deficit just by the inaccuracy of how things are logged on that packet. And it's one reason why having most of your diet coming from whole foods is going to help you track more accurately as well. And so I typically always recommend an 80-20 split of whole foods to fun foods in maintenance, and a 90 or 95 to 10 or 5% split when you are in a fat loss phase, so that you can, first of all, give yourself more nutrients from the whole foods in fat loss for the calories that you have, but also to dial in that tracking accuracy that bit more as well. Because if you are having single ingredient foods like rice or oats or potato or chicken or any vegetables or any lean proteins, all of those things, and you are having that as a bulk of your diet and you are weighing it on a scale, it's just going to be so much more accurate. And then if you're eating out multiple times a week and you are not tracking it when you're eating out, or you are not tracking accurately when you're eating out, that can literally add hundreds of calories to your tracking, and it can either wipe out your deficits completely, even perhaps put you in a surplus, even if you think you are choosing quote unquote healthy options when you are out. And this is because I just don't think people realize how much butter and oil is added to food when you're out. So with that, I always say to my clients, just add in a tablespoon of oil to your meal out to account for some of the inaccuracies. And then again, try to choose simple ingredients that are easier to track when you're eating out, especially if you're in fat loss. Because if you're working towards a goal, that is the time when you need to be even more dialed in with these things. If you are in a general maintenance phase, and then there's much more flexibility at that phase. So know the phase you're in and match the actions accordingly to it. If you're not sure if tracking accuracy is something that is relevant to you, I encourage you to do a tracking audit for 2 weeks and be so meticulous with your tracking. And when you do eat out, add that tablespoon of oil in, choose simple ingredients off the menu, overestimate the portions when you're eating out, and then you're going to be able to see if tracking accuracy is one of the things that is holding you back from getting the consistent progress that I am sure that you want. And yes, tracking accuracy also plays into whether you are looking to build muscle in terms of, again, making sure you are hitting your protein target effectively, making sure you are fueling yourself well. But I do think in fat loss that this piece is even more important if you want to see consistent progress. And especially for women whose calorie margins do tend to be smaller than men's, because obviously we need less food to maintain our bodies typically. And so let's say we are only in a 300 calorie deficit. That is so easy to completely wipe out, unfortunately, by inaccurate tracking. And the third mistake that I see so much is women not eating enough protein. So many women that come to me for coaching, when we just track what they're doing before they have started working with me, just to get a sense of where their nutrition is at right now, and it reveals that they're not eating enough protein to support their body composition goals. They're often eating less than 100 grams of protein a day, sometimes less than 80 grams. And when we work out how much they should be eating, ideally, if their goal is to build muscle or hold on to muscle when they're in fat loss, they should be eating 120, 130, 140, even 150 grams of protein. Again, it does depend on your body weight and goals. But protein is the most important macronutrient out of fats and carbs and protein for body composition, because it is the building blocks of your muscle, and it's also so crucial for holding onto muscle in a fat loss phase. It's also going to help keep you full and satisfied. It's going to help you recover from training, and it's also going to help you burn a few extra calories in the processing and digestion of protein, because it has, out of fats and carbs, the highest thermic effect of food. So it takes more energy for our body to break down that than the other macronutrients. So if you're not eating enough protein, you are making it harder for yourself to hold on to muscle mass when you're in a deficit, which is not going to create a lean, defined look. And it is so important to do everything that you can to hold onto your muscle when you're in a fat loss phase, because muscle is so crucial for your health. It's definitely crucial for the results that you want if you want to look toned, but it's more important for your metabolism and overall health to hold onto your muscle mass. And when you are looking to build muscle, you definitely need consistent protein intake across your day and across your weeks to be able to have that process work more effectively for you. So yes, there are some other elements that are going to go into that building muscle piece. Training effectively is the biggest one, but making sure you're also giving your body the building blocks that it needs to be able to build muscle effectively. So a general guideline is to aim for around 1.8 to 2.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. For most women, that works out as somewhere around 120 to around 150 grams of protein every single day. Now, if you're someone who has a significant amount of weight to lose, then you can use that calculation based on your goal body weight. And generally, eating around that 120 to 150 grams of protein a day covers most bases for most women if you are resistance training and if your goal is to change your body composition. If you are not tracking your food, then I'm going to put money on the fact that you are not going to get enough protein, because it's so much harder to just naturally get those targets hit than most people think. You have to be really intentional about hitting that protein target. I have never seen anyone just accidentally do it consistently enough to be able to get the kind of results that you are looking to get. So even if you're someone who doesn't want to track everything with their nutrition, then tracking at least just the protein for a couple of weeks is going to give you an idea of where you're at with that foundation. And for so many, it is so much lower than they think it is and where it should be as well. And increasing your protein is definitely a key part in creating a lean, toned physique. Mistake number 4, and this is definitely a big one that I see over and over and over again, is that too many women are just focused on always being in a deficit, always trying to lose fat, going to one of those online calculators, and then immediately just trying to follow the deficit calories all the time and never spending any time at intentional maintenance, whether that is spending time at intentional maintenance focusing on your metabolic health or spending time at intentional maintenance building muscle. And so especially if you are someone who has been dieting on and off for the last few years, and that dieting on and off has looked like you're either, on a diet, thinking about being on a diet, feeling guilty for not being on a diet, or thinking about your next one. And if you are not dieting, you are just doing whatever you want and you are not focusing on fueling yourself well at optimal maintenance for you, then there's a good chance that you need to give yourself some proper time away from dieting to be able to see better results next time you go into fat loss. And ideally, when you are not focusing in a fat loss phase, if you are eating at intentional maintenance and doing it well, then we want to really focus on building muscle here, because you're going to be giving yourself the energy that you need to be able to build muscle. If you pair it with getting enough protein, making sure you're getting a decent amount of daily movement throughout the day, which can look like 8 to 10,000 steps, for example, as a good baseline to aim for overall health, making sure you're still focusing on mostly whole foods, you are training, lifting weights 3 to 4 times a week, and you are really focusing on training quality here. So progression and intensity, but I'm not going to get any more into training in this episode. Then if you're focusing on spending time away from dieting, looking after your metabolic rates by dialing in those factors, as well as sleep quality, stress management, drinking enough water, such a simple but very important thing as well, getting enough fiber so your body becomes much more healthy, then the next time you go into fat loss, there is a very good chance that you will see your body respond in a more effective and more predictable way as well, because so many women are always just trying to lose weight, to see the scale go down, always cutting calories, thinking that the answer is to dig deeper, never giving their body a chance to build muscle, to recover properly, and to bring that metabolic baseline to its optimal place. So many people are just living in this adapted metabolic state where they have just dieted for so long that they feel like their metabolism is really sluggish, and it is because they have been dieting so long, but they think that the answer is to just dig deeper, and they actually need a little bit of time out to be able to restore their metabolic health, to focus on feeling what it's like to actually be well fueled and to have energy to push hard with your training, to recover better. And if you take time away from fat loss, the next time you go back into it, your body should respond in a much better way. And I share over and over again how the best results that I achieved with my physique were when I took an entire year off being in a deficit and focused on building muscle. And the reason that the fat loss phase that I'm in right now is going so smoothly is, again, because I spent most of the last 2 years actually eating at maintenance. And so what I always recommend when you are on a body transformation journey is that fat loss piece should be the smallest part of your year. Or let's say you're doing a longer fat loss phase like I am doing right now for my photo shoot prep. This will be the only one that I will be doing out of about 2 years. After that, I'm not going to be going into a fat loss phase for several months after. And I need to give my body a chance to recover. I want to focus on building muscle instead. So let's say, for example, if you're looking at a longer journey with your body transformation, you did one fat loss phase of about 3 months every single year. Then you spent the rest of the 9 months at maintenance building muscle. And if you repeated that each year, you would be seeing so much more progress and just constantly trying to diet all the time. It's a huge mistake that I see so many women make. Now, let's go into number 5. The 5th mistake is being inconsistent on weekends. So we briefly touched on it earlier when I was talking about the accuracy of tracking. But so many people are dialed in Monday to Friday. They hit their targets, they track their food, they think they are being quote unquote good. And then they feel like at the weekends, their structure goes out the window and everything falls apart. And they feel like they deserve to go and relax and have a treat and indulge because of how they have been during the week. And I'm a big believer that you don't need to earn your indulgences. In fact, plan your soul foods, your fun foods into the journey so that you can stay consistent. But if you actually want to achieve fat loss, for example, you can't just do whatever you want at the weekends, unfortunately. It just doesn't work like that. We need to actually create a deficit across the entire week. And you can just so easily wipe out an entire week of work by how you are at the weekends. If you are not tracking, if you are eating out multiple times, if you're drinking lots of alcohol and then snacking mindlessly on top of that, all of these things can just hold you back from the progress that you want. And so when it comes to women that I work with, first of all, we have a weekly calorie average for the week so that you can have a bit more flexibility at the weekends to be able to still make good progress. But I always say to my clients, when you're in fat loss, the goal is to be more dialed in so we can get in, get out, and then get back to maintenance. Maintenance and building muscle, that's where you can have more balance, more flexibility, where the calories are higher, where you can enjoy a level of balance that feels much more freeing. When it comes to being in a fat loss phase, if you bring that same level of balance into the fat loss phase, it will drag on and on and on for ages, and you probably just won't get as good results as you could do if you were more dialed in. And so everything has a trade-off. And because we don't want to spend so long in a deficit, if we are more dialed in, we can get the result that we want, and then we can focus on maintaining it after. So the guidelines I tend to give my clients are to keep eating out to 1 to 2 times a week at the most when it comes to being in a fat loss phase, and to have really simple choices when you are eating out so they are easier to track, to add that tablespoon of oil, to account for any inaccuracies, and to also keep alcohol to just 1 to 2 drinks a week max when you're in a fat loss phase, because alcohol does just slow down fat loss, unfortunately. And it can also cause us to feel like we want to eat more processed food, which can be harder to stop eating if you are also under the influence of alcohol, and all of those things that can come with it. That's another episode for another day. But keeping those guidelines of 1 to 2 alcoholic drinks a week at the most, 1 to 2 meals out a week when you're in fat loss, is going to help you stay more consistent across the entire fat loss phase to get better results, to then be able to get back to maintenance. Because otherwise, like I said, you will just be feeling like you are underfueled during the week and feeling like you're making progress, then going back again at the weekend, starting over on Monday. And we want to avoid that by focusing on bringing more consistency into the weekends. And that can look like having a structure for your weekends that is different to your week, but still has some structure so that you can still get your steps in, so that you can make sure you are still focusing on your principles, even at the weekend, getting your protein in, getting enough fiber. Yes, enjoying some meals out, but being just a bit more mindful and strategic about what you're having with those meals. For example, in photo shoot prep at the moment, I am trying to keep my meals out as much to breakfast out as possible, because then I can still enjoy the experience of eating out and do that with friends or with my husband, Joe. But I'm still able to make really good progress because it's kind of hard to inaccurately track poached eggs on toast. Whereas if I was having lots of dinners out, there would be much more margin of error for that tracking. And then let's say your goal is to build muscle. There is typically much more flexibility to be able to eat out more because you are going to have higher calories if you're eating at maintenance or even in a slight surplus. But that doesn't mean that everything again should go out the window at the weekends, because we still want to make sure you're getting enough protein, getting enough fiber, getting enough nutrients, that you're sleeping well, because that is also really important for building muscle. And if you are drinking lots of alcohol, which disrupts your sleep, then all of this stuff just starts to have a knock-on effect. And we also want to just focus on giving ourselves as many nutrients as possible to be able to have our body perform in the most responsive way as well, whether that is fat loss or muscle building. And the sixth mistake really just builds on what I've just shared there about weekends, because it is about trying to be too flexible without first having structure in place with your nutrition. And so we see on social media so much about flexible dieting, which is the process of hitting calorie and macro targets to be able to achieve your goals, or things like intuitive eating, and think that we should be able to intuitively eat towards our body composition goals. But that's something that I've not seen anyone be able to do particularly effectively, especially the closer you get to your ultimate goal, the more dialed in you need to be. And we just can't guess our way there. We need to actually have more precision at that time. But even when it comes to flexible dieting, we don't want it to be so flexible that we're just trying to wing it every single day, just kind of log as we go and just hope we hit our targets, or, just stuff all of our favorite foods into our day's plan and think that that's going to fuel us in the best way possible. Instead, we want to start with a structure of how many meals a day generally works for us to be able to manage our hunger appropriately, or to be able to fuel ourselves well around our training, especially if you're building muscle, and making sure that we're following principles for those meals, making sure that we have protein as our anchor, making sure we are getting enough fiber across the day by making sure we're including fruits and veggies and whole foods, so that we're having complex carbs to be able to, again, have energy for our training, to be able to recover effectively and get that fiber target hit, and including some healthy fats so we look after our hormones too. And then, like I said, there's always room for some fun foods along the way. And once we have that structure of making sure we're looking after our health, our performance, and how we're feeling, then we can start to build in the more fun foods around those things. But we need to take care of the structure first. And something that I typically see is, if people's hunger is all over the place, is that they're often just snacking loads throughout the day, or they're skipping breakfast because they're trying to backload their calories. And instead, we want to find a structure that allows our hunger signals to be able to find their rhythm that they can then trigger almost at the same time every single day. And for me at the moment on my photo shoot prep, I'm having 5 meals a day, and that structure works really well for me. Sometimes that can be too much for a lot of people. I do feel like I am constantly eating on this photo shoot prep, which isn't a bad thing when I'm in a deficit. But for a lot of people, 4 meals a day can work really well around their routine. And so perhaps 4 or 5 meals, depending on what's best for you and your schedule. Have them at similar times throughout the day. Like I said, focused on balanced plates. So we have protein, we have complex carbs, some healthy fats thrown in there as well. And if all of our meals follow this structure and we are getting our fiber and our protein hit, then we can start to add in more flexibility based on the structure that we've already had. Or if we're going out for dinner, for example, still keeping that structure for the first couple of meals so that you are, again, looking after your health and your nutrients in the process. So if you learn how to implement that structure with tracking so that you know that you're hitting those variables that I've mentioned, then once you have built that framework and you have achieved the results that you want to achieve, let's say you are then in maintenance after that, you can start to transition away from tracking, but continue to keep that structure in that you have already built to be able to also maintain your results without tracking. So many people I see try and just fit all the foods that they were eating before into the targets that they've been given, and yet they are hungry, they are finding it hard to stick to because they've got cravings, because they actually need more nutrients in their diet, or they are just grabbing snacks on the go or just trying to track on the go. And for that person, we normally need to bring in actually more structure first, focusing more on whole foods, making some tweaks, adding in some more things like veggies and fruits or different quality protein sources. And then they find that it's so much easier to get into a rhythm that they can actually stick to day in and day out. And then you can build in more flexibility and more fun foods from that really solid foundation. The last mistake does tie a lot of this together, and it is chasing fads instead of focusing on foundations. So let's say you're trying intermittent fasting because you heard that that works, or you're cutting carbs because someone told you carbs make you fat. They don't. Or you're doing keto or paleo, whatever the latest trend is, and you miss the actual fundamentals that create results. So the most important things for body composition is, first of all, energy balance. The total calories that you consume are the biggest driver in whether you lose, gain, or maintain weight. The next layer of the most important things to focus on for your nutrition is to focus on the macronutrients. Getting enough protein for your body and your goals, whether you are in fat loss or building muscle. And then making sure that you're getting enough fats to look after your hormone health, and getting enough carbs to be able to help with energy and performance and recovery as well. All macros matter. Then after that layer of macros, we want to focus on making sure you're getting enough micronutrients. That's going to come down to eating mostly whole foods and focusing on getting enough fiber. 25 grams of fiber a day is just a rough guideline that's going to give you a good baseline to be able to focus on in your journey. And then, of course, we want to focus on things like consistent training, recovery, getting enough daily movement, making sure your sleep and stress management is in a good place as well, getting enough water. These are the foundations. So if you do not have those elements dialed in, that is where you want to put your attention. Everything else, things like fasting, if it helps you to stick to a calorie deficit and it is a useful tool for you, then go for it. But don't feel that you have to do something just because it's trending. I naturally tend to have, an overnight fast, but I just don't consider it intermittent fasting. I tend to have my last meal at 7 and I don't tend to eat again until about 8 or 9 in the morning. But I'm not trying to fast. I just like that rhythm for the quality of my sleep. You do not need to fast to get great results. Sometimes it can be a tool that helps people. Sometimes it can actually hold them back. You do not need to cut out carbs in order to be able to achieve your goal. In fact, doing so will probably hold you back when it comes to actually building a lean, defined body, because carbs are really important for training performance, as well as having energy for your day-to-day life, as well as it being a consistent nutrition strategy that you can actually stick with, because carbs are tasty and they're so important for a muscle building journey. So do not cut out carbs. And then anything else that has a bunch of rules or restrictions or lists of food to eat and food to avoid, typically they're not teaching you exactly the principles that you need to focus on. And it can cause you to then think that it is because you're eating this particular food that you are not achieving your results, or that you need to eat more of this superfood instead to be able to get that edge. And actually you need to come back to learning about energy balance and those foundations that I have just mentioned. Those are the most important things. All of that matters way more than whether you're taking any particular supplement as well. A supplement should only, again, be used to supplement solid foundations. That is the most important thing for you to focus on. It was when I stopped chasing fads in my own journey and really started focusing on those basic, boring, foundational things I've just mentioned, tracking my calories, getting enough protein, enjoying that level of balance in all of the macros, making sure that I was being more accurate with eating out, focusing on having time away from dieting and phasing my nutrition properly, I started to see so much progress, as well as matching my training to my goals, which was strength training, walking enough for my daily movement as the key bits. But like I said, I'm not going to dive into training more on this episode. So there you have it, 7 nutrition mistakes that I see holding so many people back from getting more consistent results. So let's recap them. Number 1 is eating clean, but eating too much for fat loss or under fueling if your goal is building muscle. Number 2 is not tracking accurately or consistently. Number 3 is not eating enough protein for your body and your goals. Number 4 is always being in a deficit, always focusing on fat loss calories, never focusing on intentional maintenance to look after your metabolic health or building muscle. Number 5 is being too inconsistent on your weekends. Number 6 is trying to be too flexible without having that structure in place first. And number 7 is chasing fads instead of focusing on foundations. So what I want you to do is to think about which of those 7 areas jumps out at you the most and resonates with you the most on your journey, and then commit to dialing that one in this week. And of course, if you want support, really dialing in your nutrition, your training, and your recovery all together in a way that's actually customized to you, along with the education and support to implement it and to be able to adjust it along the way. That is exactly what we do inside Lean Body Blueprint. So just a reminder that enrollment opens on April the 6th. Make sure you join the priority list using the link in the show notes below to get the early bird pricing and an exclusive discount too. Because having the support to actually work your way through this can just save you so much time. That's it for today. If this episode was helpful for you, it would be so awesome if you could leave a 5-star rating or review on the podcast platform that you are listening to this on. Or if you're watching on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button, because this is going to help the episode find and be able to help more people too. Thanks so much for listening, and I will chat to you in the next episode.